everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm Taylor Hill, Nantucket's new Human Services Director. Thank you all for having me. So our select board has proclaimed 2020 to be the year of the Nantucket Senior. And with that wonderful proclamation in mind, and on behalf of the Council on Aging and the Nantucket Center of Elder Affairs, I am so thrilled to introduce Robin Lipson, the Deputy Secretary of the Executive Office of Elder Affairs.
Thank you, everybody. It is really lovely to be here. Admittedly, the ride over was a tad but it got much calmer as we approached. So as Taylor said, I'm Robin Lipson, and I'm the Deputy Secretary for the State Executive Office of Elder Affairs, which is your state agency that thinks about all things aging. With me this afternoon is my colleague, Catherine Downs. Catherine is our policy director, and aside from being brilliant, she also leads a lot of our age-friendly work, and has a really good 360 view of what's going on in the Commonwealth. And so she's just a great person, I think, to help answer some questions, to give us some examples of what's going on around the state. And if you have a question like, you know, are there any towns that do X or Y, she is likely to know that answer. So I don't want to make you nuts. Do you want me to stand in one place? Because I'm likely to roam if, okay. So let me start by just telling you a little bit about where I work and what I focus on, just to give you some context. And then we'll dive into what it means to be age-friendly, why the year of the senior is so exciting, and some other things. Does that sound okay, people? All right, so just a word about the Executive Office of Elder Affairs. Our mission is to promote the independence, empowerment, and well-being of older adults, people who are aging who might have physical disabilities or other disabilities, and their caregivers. And I just want for you to look at the mission for a minute, and look at the values and kind of notice the words independence, empowerment, and well-being, right? This isn't necessarily about sickness, demise, death, right? It's really about living as we are older. And we really work from the premise that we all benefit from the energy and experience and the influence of older adults in our communities. So that's kind of where I start my work from. And just to give you a sense about how aging services in Massachusetts all fit together, you folks are a council on aging, so you are one of the 350 organizations in that first blue box on the left, right? So you are part of a much bigger system of organizations that is really the landing pad for folks as they think about how they want to connect in the community as they get older, whether it's that they want to participate in programs, whether they might need assistance paying a fuel bill, whether they want to volunteer, whether they want to provide expertise on something like environmental protection or weaving or whatever it is. So you folks are one of the 350 councils on aging. There are actually only 350 of them because in 2 towns the council has merged, because we actually have 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts. There are also 25 designated agencies called Aging Service Access Points, and we have someone here from the Cape and Islands. Where did you go? Yes, right here from what is it, Elder Services of Cape and the Islands, right? So those are 25 organizations that are responsible for providing and arranging for many of the services that people need in their homes, whether it's meals that are delivered, whether it's hands-on care and assistance with things like showering or dressing, whether it's homemaking, whether some people need a companion because they might have a cognitive disability. So that's what the 25 Aging Service Access Points do. And I won't go into the rest of this, but the point is that in Massachusetts we have a very well-evolved and pretty effective aging services network. We are the envy of our colleagues across the country who don't have this kind of rich web of services and organizations that work together to help support people as they age in communities. And I know you're familiar with a lot of the programs that the Executive Office of Elder Affairs funds and manages, including the nutrition program. Do you folks do meals here?
Meals on Wheels.
You do Meals on Wheels, and do you have a congregate meal here?
Yes.
Okay, so that's something that's funded through our nutrition program. Be good to your state legislators, because that money nearly all comes from state funding, and it's critically important. We serve over 9 million meals a year to people. We also run a program which is called the State Home Care Program, which is the program where if you find yourself unable to live independently and you need assistance, that's the program that goes into people's homes and supports them in a way that they can remain in their community instead of having to live in a nursing home. And we serve about 60,000 people through that program. And then the other program that might be very visible to you is SHINE, where we counsel people on health insurance options. How many of you have seen a SHINE counselor? Good idea. It will be the first thing I do when I turn 65, because even I, a healthcare professional, will not be able to sort through that. And then we also run the Protective Services Program, which is the program that takes and investigates allegations of elder abuse, exploitation, and neglect. And you know, if you read the news, you know that there's a lot of exploitation, a lot of financial exploitation, a lot of scamming. So we do a lot of those investigations as well. So that's kind of what we do. Why I'm so excited to be here today is I am really honored to be able to do this work in the Baker-Polito administration, where they have made aging a priority. Shortly after I took this job, just about 5 years ago, we started talking with the governor about aging. And as he reached a milestone birthday, he thought, oh, we should all think about this. And so we were very, very fortunate that he made aging a priority. And the quote up here is from a speech that he gave a few years back. It's the State of the Commonwealth Address, which he gave a few weeks ago, but this is from 2018, I think, where he said, "We need to think differently about aging in Massachusetts. This isn't just about acknowledging a shift in demographics. It's about being intentional in our planning to ensure that those who grow up here, who raise families and build communities, can continue to contribute their energy, experience, and talents where they live and make Massachusetts the most age-friendly state." So, like, that's a wonderful expression of support and acknowledgement that aging plays a factor in how we operate as a state. He was the first governor to do that. Since then, a few have followed suit, but we are really a leader in the country in terms of taking this on and making it a priority. And I want to talk a little bit about what that looks like. So what we did, he signed an executive order. He created a special commission that consisted of 24 people. Of those 24, I would say maybe half of them might have been experts in aging or human services. The other half not. You know, people from technology, from finance, from housing, from transportation. And so as we sat around the table, I thought, whoa, we need to build some knowledge here. We need to build some expertise, because some people are really very experienced in aging and are experts, and others know about healthcare technology. It's a whole different thing. So what we did is we started by listening, and we organized some expert panels to talk to us about housing and transportation and economic security and technology. But then we also said, let's hit the road. Let's go around the state and let's have some open listening sessions and ask people kind of what are they thinking about as they age in their community? What works in their community? And what do they think the biggest challenge is? So if we had come to Nantucket, which we did not, we did go to Hyannis, but we didn't get over the puddle here. If we had asked you, you know, what really, really works about aging here on this island, what would you have said? The community, the tightness of the community. And what are some of the challenges about being here as you grow older?
The big puddle.
The big puddle, sorry. So isolation, is that what you mean, the separation from it?
It's
Okay.
getting there, and the
Okay.
expense of it.
Okay, so expense, isolation,
Cost of living here.
cost of living,
Getting to medical.
Yeah.
so transportation and assistance getting around.
Especially if you have to go across the puddle, as you say, to
Right.
get to it's very expensive to do.
Right.
Not just getting on the boat, but.
And then there's transportation at the other end, all that, right? Right, yes.
The people upon whom we have always leaned, but aren't here to help us.
Right, right, so,
We've developed our techniques for dealing with everything because of the people, but they're not all here.
right, right. So many of you, or many people, as they grow older, are alone. Their family's not here, et cetera. Right, yes,
I would say that the repair and the maintenance of one's home.
okay, okay, yeah.
I think the church groups are excellent in helping with providing things and all. You can go to any one of the pastors, I think, and they would try to arrange help for you.
Right,
Or,
Right.
it's wonderful that
Right.
way. There is that,
Right.
whether you're a member of their church
Or
family or not, they'll
Right.
help you if you
Right.
go and ask.
Right.
But it's having to swallow your pride sometimes and ask.
right. So it's this is the commitment to the community by the community, which I think is probably very special and somewhat unique here. It may be, like, I live in a wonderful community, but I don't think it's quite the way you folks are describing. It's a little bit more anonymous. I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
I think finding the resources to find the resource
Right.
has always been a challenge. We have a lot of things that go on that, are separate from, we need the coordination of what's available.
Right.
Do a better job with that.
Right, to know what might be available if you need it. So, yes, one more, and then I
I
want to
think one
tell
of
you
the
what other
major
people
things
said.
is changing the perception about aging and the
Oh.
perception about aged.
I'm so glad you
What
said
they are
that.
able to do.
You're gonna have to wait about 5 slides, but I have a treat for you. Okay. So we toured around the state, we heard from over 500 people, and here's what they said. I come from a healthcare background, spent my whole career in healthcare. I thought, we're gonna hear about, I'm worried about a doctor, I'm worried about getting healthcare, I'm worried about Medicare premiums. We actually didn't hear very much of that at all. What we heard about was exactly what all of you people said, right? Number one concern of people, transportation. And it's not about, can I keep driving? It's, transportation's a shortcut for, can I spontaneously and independently go to where I want to go, right? That might be to visit a family member, to do an errand, to go to church, to go to the hairdresser. But transportation, even in urban areas, people said was a huge, huge, huge concern. So you might be dealing with folks who have driven their whole life and have no idea how to use public transportation in areas that are blessed with public transportation options. You might have folks who have always been independently ambulating, who now might need a cane or a walker and just find it difficult to navigate getting in and out of a vehicle. I mean, there's just all kinds of things associated with transportation. You hear from people, and I bet this is an issue here, I am worried about tripping on the cobblestones or the potholes, right? One of the things we heard when we were in Barnstable was, I used to walk to dinner, but I don't anymore because they turned off the streetlights. And we don't go to the village anymore because it's too dark to walk. So really interesting ideas about what mobility means to people. And as you start to think about some of those issues, like the lights being turned off, you can actually really see some solutions, right? Turn the damn lights back on. Or, fix the sidewalks, etc. We also heard a lot about, people are very worried about their economic security, about whether they can afford what they need, whether they can afford housing, whether there's an option for them if they have to move out of their current dwelling, either because of stairs or the need to be somewhere smaller. People talked a lot about being isolated, even in cities. So yes, you are physically isolated from the mainland, but even people in cities and suburban and exurban areas talked about isolation. The isolation that comes from either losing friends and family, or having a physical challenge to get out and about, or to not feeling purpose or a reason to connect with others. So isolation is pervasive, whether you are physically isolated or not. And then we heard a lot from caregivers. These are people who are taking care of others, oftentimes a family member, who just felt like their lives had changed. Many of them had been working and supporting themselves and saving for retirement. Many of those folks have stopped working to take care of someone. They've dipped into their retirement savings to pay their bills. And then their loved one's condition exacerbates, they ultimately may pass away, and you're left with an individual who has poured, all this love and energy into caregiving, who has depleted his or her resources, and who is alone because they've kind of been isolated from the rest of society as they've been taking care of someone. So we heard a lot about that, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Let's go to the next one. So we took all that information, sat back down again with those 24 people, and those 24 people, by the way, were on the road with us, sat back down with them, and we decided we needed to make a blueprint, like kind of what do we stand for? What does aging look like in Massachusetts? How are we going to think about it? So the framework on the right is actually a social justice framework. There are all kinds of public health frameworks and community impact frameworks, and you can talk to academics and come up with all kinds of rubrics. But we really felt this was about social justice. We felt like this was about equity and access and inclusion and purpose. And so it kind of reads social justice to us. And I'm happy to give you links to all of these slides so that you don't have to squint or take notes. And what we really thought that we as a state had to do was we really had to focus on 4 things. We had to focus on improving economic security for people, right? And what are ways that people can be more economically secure? Maybe they need to work longer. Maybe we need to help them save more. Maybe we need to take advantage of the tax deferral programs that cities and towns have. I'll talk about a program that we just rolled out to help people pay for their Medicare premiums and coinsurance and deductible, which essentially puts more money back in your pocket if you're not paying those bills. So we know that if people are going to live longer, maybe to be 100 years old, and maybe they retired at 65, they just may not have the resources to be economically secure. So that's one thing we think we really have to focus on. The second thing is to ensure that people have access to affordable services when they need them. Whether that's help to maintain your home and to fix a broken fence, whether that's access to hands-on services should you need physical help with your activities of daily living. But I think it was to your point, having those services, having them accessible, and having people understand where they can get the information about how to tap into those services seems like an important pillar of what it needs to look like in Massachusetts. The third thing is about facilitating connection and engagement. This idea that many people are isolated and lonely, and how do we facilitate opportunities for people to connect, engage, have purpose, seems to be an important aspect of aging optimally. And then finally, we decided that we really wanted to look at how communities could become age-friendly to support people as they age. And as part of this framework, we had some aspirational ideas. This was 2017. 2017, we had some aspirational ideas. And one of them was that we consider looking at whether Massachusetts could become an age-friendly state. So let me talk a little bit about what that means. To me, what an age-friendly community means is that it's a community that makes some very deliberate decisions to support optimal aging by leveraging opportunities for good health, for engagement and participation, for transportation, right? Aging isn't always going to be, all positive and all unicorns and rainbows. But if you think about the idea of supporting people to age as optimally as they can, right? How is it that we all bring out the best in ourselves, and what kind of support do we need that? I think that's where an age-friendly community comes in. And to me, the real marker is not when all the people who work in aging or who come to the senior center are thinking about this, but it's when all the other people and all the other domains, housing, transportation, recreation, communication, are thinking about it. So about, 6 months ago, they announced, I don't know if this even came across your radar because it was a Boston thing, they announced a big change at Logan Airport for Uber and Lyft, right? Have any of you used Uber and Lyft? And it used to be that an Uber and Lyft could pull right up to the terminal, and it was creating traffic havoc, and they decided that they were gonna put it in another place, and they just announced there shall be this change. And I knew that Boston was becoming an age-friendly community when I got a call from the head of Massport saying, we think we should talk to you about what that would mean for older people. And I was like, yes, this is so exciting, right? Little things get us all excited. But that to me is a great sign that a community is thinking about being age-friendly. It's when you get everyone else to look at things through an aging lens.
But have they done anything?
About the Uber and Lyft thing at the airport?
Yeah.
Yes, they did all kinds of things. They had a user group, it included older adults and some people with disabilities, and they came up with some arrangements for folks. My mother is visually impaired, and she's 90, and I can't take an Uber right to the terminal, but she can. So yeah, they have done some workarounds.
Because I just came through and, and I know that there are all the signs, but in coming to Boston, I didn't see any sign of any, like, we can help you get over there.
Yeah, it may be that it's a well-kept secret, so we'll have to get some information on how you access it, but you can access, there's some special status that you can punch in when you go to get a ride that brings them to the curb. And then I think in some terminals they have transport help to help people get to the actual drop-off point. I haven't traveled that much recently, so I haven't seen it myself. But anyway, this is all to say that there's a lot going on in Massachusetts that made us feel like we could create our own plan to be an age-friendly state. And our plan is called Reimagine Aging, with the MA for Massachusetts and big capital letters. That was our big, bold design move in state government. So we have a plan that we have submitted to AARP. And we were the first state in the nation to submit the plan. There are about, I think, 6 other states, Catherine, who have made the same commitment. And what we have done as a group of states is said, this is on our agenda, we're putting resources into this, and we really want all of our cities and towns to be thinking about this and doing this work, the same kind of work that you're doing here in this community. And I won't tell you all about the plan because I think what matters more is what's actually happening. So let's go to the next slide. I guess the one other thing though that I want to say about what age-friendly means is, it doesn't mean that it's just good for old people, right? What's good for someone who's 85 is also good for someone who's 8. One of the projects that the city of Boston did was they charted out all of the publicly accessible restrooms. And they did that through their aging commission because older adults were saying, I don't walk as much, I don't walk as far, I'm a little uncertain about where the bathroom is. So they put them all together on a map and on a website. And everybody thought, this is awesome. People loved it, people are using it. But do you know who the biggest users of it are?
People with little kids.
People with little kids, absolutely right. Moms and strollers. So that's a great example about how something may start as an initiative for older adults, but it's truly great for everyone. Now tourists know about this, and it's just a great story. So kind of a snapshot on what's going on in Massachusetts is we have a lot of work in this area. We have nearly 200 communities that are working on something related to age-friendly. And 70 communities have received the official designation from AARP or the World Health Organization. That's a fun and joyous event to have. People come, the president of AARP will come, pictures, balloons, lots of laughs, but we've had 70 cities and towns celebrate that. We've had about 160 towns engage in work about dementia to make themselves more dementia capable and more dementia friendly. And do you have a memory cafe in Nantucket?
One started.
Awesome.
I will be fascinated.
So I am so proud to
It's
say.
actually going to be a community school
Okay.
downtown. It's in partnership.
I am
with them.
so proud. Massachusetts has more memory cafes on a population basis than any other state. So I'm glad, and now we have
We'll
one
be on the
more.
list soon.
Yeah, so those are really effective and wonderfully engaging programs that really support the whole community. And then have you folks heard of villages?
Yes.
Yes, where basically there's an organization and people become affiliates or members, and I may drive you to doctor's appointments and you may help me with my mending or whatever. So villages are really beginning to explode in Massachusetts. We had one start in Northampton a year ago. It now has 600 members. Northampton's not a big town. And they now have 600 or 700 members after about a year or 18 months, because people really like that sense of connection, that sense of community, as a way to break down the barriers to asking for help and getting some support. And it's very inexpensive. You know, you need someone to do a newsletter and keep a database, but a lot of it's just volunteer driven. So that's kind of a snapshot. We are really, really focused on making sure that we as a state support communities that don't have resources to do this themselves. So we look especially at gateway communities that have so many demands for social services and housing and other supports. And we look specifically at rural communities, and I'll just consider islands in the rural community category because you are isolated and you look different than cities. But that's something that's on my plate, is to make sure that it's not just the wealthy suburban communities that are doing this, that it really does spread across the state. So this work takes many, many forms. I think the most common form is the form we have here. A group of citizens come together. They might do an assessment. You all did an assessment with UMass, right? And you got some great recommendations from that. So that's maybe the most common way to do this. Just south of Boston, we had a Chamber of Commerce that said, you know what? I think this aging stuff is important to my business or to our businesses. So we have a chamber-led, age-friendly effort just south of Boston. We have some situations where health centers, so out in Springfield, the Bay State Health System, which is a big health system, teaching hospitals, several community hospitals, they have decided to become an age-friendly health system, and they are now working with the community to think about how they become an age-friendly community. University of Massachusetts has become the first age-friendly university, meaning that they will think about people of all ages in their curriculum and in their programs and in how they do their work. And we have some examples where we have a healthcare organization. So in Framingham, there's a very strong Latino health network, and they have been the engine behind the age-friendly movement there. And some of that's about equalizing access to services and kind of tackling some health disparities and inequities in folks as they age. It's really, really, really effective work. So, as I said, work going on in dozens and dozens of communities, and it all looks different. Some of it's regional. The Berkshires kind of have a regional approach. There's something called the MAGIC group, which is west of Boston, and that's another group of planning councils that are doing this work together. Catherine, you want to talk about this for a second?
Sure. So a lot of what we at the state, I guess I'll stand, I'm very tiny, have prioritized in terms of like supporting local communities with their own age and dementia friendly efforts is to publish like best practice guides and work with partners like the Massachusetts Municipal Association to produce great best practices and helpful resources, including even like people's emails if you're interested in getting involved with the movement. Robin can maybe talk about the Community Compact Program, which is a funding mechanism that cities and towns can take advantage of. But I wanted to highlight some of the work that our state agency has done around the age and dementia-friendly integration toolkit. And I have some handouts. I didn't know how many people would be here, so it's not quite enough, but I'm happy to leave them behind. We have an online database, I would call it, on mass.gov that basically has, like for each domain as age-friendly, so transportation and housing, employment, family caregiving. There's a ton of different like national, local, state resources cataloged in there if you're interested in understanding how to integrate both movements and both principles from the start. And then one of the things that we heard when we started doing this work with AARP and MCOA and the Massachusetts Healthy Aging Collaborative was that kind of inventory was helpful, but just like you guys all know, it's like too much information can be really overwhelming. So people wanted almost that step-by-step guide, like, hey, I'm starting on this journey of planning to become age or dementia friendly. I think here in Nantucket, you guys are such a great example because you've done some of the research. You have the Memory Cafe opening in March. I know you've done a lot of dementia friendly training, like with first responders and community members. So you're already on the right track to kind of integrate both movements from the start. But people wanted to know, like, just step by step, very concretely, how do I do this? So I'll leave copies of that guide here, and it's also online. But then in terms of funding, we do have a mechanism through the state that is open to different communities for age and dementia friendly. So Robin, do you want to talk about community
Sure.
conference?
So this is most important for anybody who is a town employee. So
Yes.
there's a program run out of the Lieutenant Governor's office called Community Compact Best Practices. And it's available to any city or town, and there are 8 or 9 best practice areas. You know, one of them's in transportation, and one of them's in climate change and environment. But a year ago, we added a best practice around age and dementia friendly. So what a city or a town can do when they're eligible, and you have to figure out when the town is eligible based on when they got their last compact, is you can submit an application, and you can say what the initiative is you want to work on, and you might get some money to work on it from the Lieutenant Governor, and then she might come and hang out with you guys, which is really kind of fun. And I'll tell you, if you have a Zumba class, she is really good at Zumba. I have witnessed that before. So, you know, the kinds of things that you could get help with from a community compact are, you know, you talked about home repair, right? What if you were to get a little bit of money to figure out how to start a home repair program to leverage people from, you know, the trades or from a vocational school or whatever, but you know, so that might be one thing you could do. Another thing you could do is experiment with transportation in the off season when you don't have the wealth of public transportation that people might want. So I'd encourage you to look at that. We can send you all the links, but that's kind of an example. And then there's funding. AARP has a challenge grant out that challenges communities to become age friendly. So you might want to look at that. Sometimes what people do with that money is they hire a project coordinator. You know, sometimes just 10 hours of somebody a week or a month makes all the difference in supporting volunteers and getting something done. So you could look at AARP, and then the Tufts Health Plan Foundation also has a grant-making cycle that's funded a lot of this work, and that has helped communities, you know, take their community needs assessment and actually prioritize 2 or 3 action items and then do them. So I just encourage you, given the interest in this room, I would encourage you to look at whether you can get some support to extend the work that you're all doing as volunteers. So, it's great to talk about having an age-friendly state. It's awesome, but I don't think we get very far if we don't deal with ageism. So these are some of the things that I have seen that so completely irk me that I might scream. So the left is a crossword puzzle, I think from the New York Times. It was called, what was it called?
The clue is geezers.
Right.
With the.
Right. So, you know, like, it's just like, you know, okay, so the word was old and it's fine, but the word geezer is just a little ageist. There was, right, in the Atlantic, the tyranny of the 70-somethings. They were kind of talking about the presidential candidates. There was something, and I can't remember where this is from, but this is the most egregious that I've seen. Japan's slow demographic apocalypse. 90,000 per year are dying and rotting alone in Japan. Really?
That's so dehumanizing.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible. This was in the press. What was the other one? Oh, the silver tsunami, right? So I have people come into my office every week and say, oh, I'm from MIT. I have this great new app. It's wonderful. You need to look at it because the silver tsunami is here and you need to fix it. So what is a tsunami, right? It's a natural disaster. Nothing good comes of it. It leaves death and destruction in its wake. An apocalypse is probably the same thing, right? I have this vision of everything shaking and then the world ending, right? These are not words we should use to talk about aging. We just shouldn't use them. There's nothing about those natural disasters that has anything to do with aging. Those are unpredictable, isolated, horrific, deadly events. aging is not unpredictable. It often results in death, but it is not unpredictable. And it is not a big shake and then a splat, right? So we need to expunge all this stuff if we're gonna think about being an age-friendly state. So one thing we can do is we can put out some different images about what older adults look like and what they do. So are any of you on Instagram? Yeah? So if you're on Instagram, go look at the grandmas of Instagram. They are these wildly cool, older women that just are having fun on Instagram. So this caption says, I'm not 20, I don't want to be 20, but I am really freaking cool. That's what I think about when I'm posting a photo. And you look at these pictures and they just make you smile because the women are just really cool. The other one that I wanted to point out to you is what the city of Boston has done. I don't know if any of you have seen this campaign. If you've been in Boston, they have posters at Logan Airport. There are some wraps on buses and in other public spaces. But what they did is they said, we really want to change kind of the mental image that people have of older adults. So they looked around their community of people that either volunteer with them or get services with them or that they work with. And they picked 8 adults that are up there on the top. They range from, I think, 60 to 103. They did photo shoots with all of them. This woman here with the red shirt on, she actually is the president of AARP Massachusetts. She chairs their board. So they did photo shoots with them, and then they interviewed them all, and there's a poster for each of them. These images are completely available to you if you want to use them and adapt them for Nantucket. They have set this up in a way where you can do that, and we're happy to connect you. So here is what Irene said. Irene is 103. And she said, you think I'm out of touch? Whatever. I use a smartphone. I paint every day. I play Sudoku on my tablet. And I spend time with my boyfriend. I'm a lot of things, but senile isn't one of them. And what they did is they paired these vibrant pictures with an ageist word like senile or, dull or, frail. And you can go look this up, and it is just the coolest ad campaign I've ever seen. They did this with an intern and one staff person.
Scrappy.
It was very scrappy, and this is going to win an advertising award. There's no question this is going to win an award. So one of the things we can do is just change the visual images people have of aging. The other thing we can do, Catherine, if you'll flip, is we can start to think about changing the language. So we can try and get away from words like cliff and tsunami and apocalypse. We can try and get away from words like burden, vulnerable, and we can stop talking about old people as them, right? It's really us. And we can start to think about aging being about accumulating assets and wisdom and momentum. We can talk about our own experience instead of their experience. And we're very fortunate because the Tufts Health Plan Foundation put about $250,000 into some training to help all of us be better about language. We ran that training at a statewide meeting for all the councils on aging. We have run it at the State House for state employees. We have run it in some communities that have asked for it. And I'm a particular bear with the press, like if they call me and they want to do a story, I kind of say to them, okay, off the record, I'm not going to talk to you unless you promise me you're not going to use these words. Right, and I really, really push this in the media because the media, as you saw from my first slide, is one of the first culprits, or one of the biggest culprits. So we are all over this. We'd love it if you were all over this. It'd be interesting for you to just look at your local paper. You must know the reporters who report for your local paper, and you can have this conversation. We have materials to help you have this conversation, and we could probably even get somebody down here to do a training. Okay? And here are some local examples about how, as we've talked about reframing aging and changing the conversation of the visuals, here are some examples of what's happened. So bottom right is Age Strong Commission, which are the Boston pictures that I showed you of Irene. Starting on the upper left, so the Barnstable Senior Center actually changed their name. They did a little bit of research, and they now reopened as the Barnstable Adult Community Center, signaling that adult is adult, it's not 18, or it might be 18, but you know, it's a way to kind of take age out of the equation and to make it more accessible and more attractive for people who might be in their 60s or 70s. The work in Salem, Massachusetts around Age Friendly, they call Salem for All Ages. It's not Age Friendly Salem, it's Salem for All Ages. And they reopened their senior center as a community life center. And then there's an organization in the Boston area that used to be called Jewish Housing for the Elderly. They do a lot of affordable housing for seniors. And they renamed themselves To Life Communities because their residents said, we don't like the word elderly, and we're not all Jewish, so let's change the name. And so they changed their name to To Life, which is kind of this very vibrant, upbeat name. So the one other thing I want to leave you with, kind of in terms of big picture, is that I think it's a big part of my job and the job of my colleagues and people I work with is to try and embed aging in all policies. And so, Catherine, would you talk about some of these examples as ways that we have kind of gotten out of our aging bubble?
Yeah, they're really exciting. So starting at the top left, you see that man there? His name's Mark Butler, and he's the president of Cigna New England. And here he is, like, FaceTiming with his dad, who's in his 90s and still lives independently at home. And so Mark, as part of the Massachusetts Business Roundtable, is part of this business community of really large employers who is actually going through a family caregiving experience himself. Never really identified himself as the term family caregiver, just, well, I'm a son, this is what I do for my dad, I love my dad, I'd do anything for him. But now, as I think the workplace is changing and employers are thinking a little bit more about competitive recruitment and retention opportunities for their workforce, so many employers in Massachusetts, and I'm sure on the island, are thinking about family caregiving as a critical part of their workforce strategy. And so we're very privileged at the state to actually have a very good partnership, a very organic partnership with the business community to think about innovative practices that employers can employ to support and retain family caregivers across the lifespan, right? So when Robin says age-friendly is all ages, yes, we want to support the mom or dad who needs to take parental leave to bond with a new child, but are people equally valuing and talking about having to leave work early because, you know what, my mom called, my dad called, he's confused, I have to drop so-and-so off at the adult day health center. So we're working really tightly with the business community to achieve a lot of that. The middle frame is some of the work that we engage with Babson College this semester and their Future Lab on Mobility, which is like an innovation center to think about transportation and mobility solutions. And this is a MBA level class. It's a 2-semester course. It's a whole, engage with the community, learn a bunch of things, actually talk to people, really understand what people need, what people want in terms of transportation and mobility design. And I think it was in the summer when they were planning for the fall, they actually called us and they were like, we want to do something around older adults and people with disabilities. And that is what we want to focus on for the year-long project. And Robin and I were like, yes, we're totally there. So we got to partner with them for the past semester when they were, doing a lot of the observation and engaging with older adults to just ask the question, right? What are you looking for? What are some of the challenges in community? If you had $1 million and could design something new for transit, what would it be? And so now moving into the spring semester, they're focused more on solutions and new ideas. So we'll continue to partner with them on that. And then the last one I'll talk about that I think is pretty cool is we've been doing a lot of work with the Massachusetts Municipal Association, and it's really heartening to see that they have taken an age-friendly lens on a lot of their work. And every year they publish a list of municipal best practices to try to influence cities and towns to kind of move towards the same strategies and different innovations. And they endorsed accessory dwelling units, which is such an important part of creating an age-friendly community from a housing perspective, as one of their best practices. So we've been really fortunate to have spreading the aging seeds to unusual partners and really finding people who want to be engaged in this work with us as partners, and we're not forcing anyone to do anything. People are actually finding us to do a lot of this work.
And I would just point out, so the Topsfield Fair, has anybody ever been to the Topsfield Fair? First age and dementia friendly fair in the country. They trained 400 volunteers in dementia so that you could bring someone to the fair who might have a cognitive limitation, and they could be comfortable at the fair. The volunteers knew how to help people get to quieter places, not feel overwhelmed. So imagine if every county fair in the country trained their volunteers in dementia, what that would do for community and the ability to reduce isolation for people. So I just love that example. The other example that I think will resonate for you is many towns are doing training with their law enforcement officials around dementia, which I know you folks did. And then I think the picture on the bottom right is Swampscott High, which is what they did is when they went to go build a new senior center, they combined it with the high school. It is adjacent to the high school, and students flow back and forth. So my mom is 90. She lives in Swampscott, and she doesn't go to the senior center because she's not old enough. But she did go there, and I'm just, who knows when that magic moment will be, but I go to my senior center, right, and I'm 30 years younger than she is, but she did go up there for a computer consult. Some kid from the high school helped her, with an iPad and all this other stuff, so it's really cool, because they've created a different kind of community. They've created an intergenerational community. So I know you folks are all about, you need a new senior center, or you might want more space. So think about places where you might connect with other organizations. And then the last thing I want to talk about, because I know it was front and center on people's minds, is around economic security. And it is very hard in this country. If you live on the average Social Security income, you cannot afford a one-bedroom apartment in any city in the United States. That's just a fact. It's a reality. So most people by definition are economically fragile, especially if they didn't have a home as an asset that they can leverage or use. So one of the things there are a couple of streams here. One is to really make it more comfortable for people to work longer. When we were doing those hearings a couple of years ago, we had lots of people say, I want to work, I'm looking for a job, but they told me they really wanted someone who they'd have for 3 or 4 years, and they turned me down. So they want younger employees. Does anybody know what the average stay is for a millennial in a job?
A couple of years.
A couple of years. Other guesses?
6 months.
6 months. It's actually 9 months. It's 9 months. So here you have an employer saying, gee, I think I want the millennial because I'll have them for longer. And it's a sure bet that millennial is out the door within less than a year. Whereas, if I walk in, I might want to work another 10 years. They'll probably have me for 10 more years. So some of what we need to do as a Commonwealth is bust some of the myths about older workers. There's some interesting research being done that talks about how older workers improve customer satisfaction. That obviously can be tied to profits, so we're trying to pull all that together so that the business community understands that. And then we have a number of businesses that have raised their hands and said, I'd really like to be an age-friendly business. I'd like to create an environment where older people can work, where people with caregiving responsibilities have flexibility. It does not cost more to have older workers. They are not more expensive. And so we are really working hard with employers so that people can work longer, whether that's full-time work or part-time work. We're also working with employers to help them think through how they can help their employees save. So how many of you contributed to some kind of retirement savings plan? Okay. So if you asked younger people to raise their hands, many of them are not contributing. And it's because it's a choice, and they think, oh, I'm 25, I'm invincible, I'll wait, or I don't have the money. So what some employers are doing now is it's still optional, but they're assuming you're going to be in it. They enroll you, and then they tell you can disenroll if you want. And what that's starting to do is it's starting to create retirement assets for people who wouldn't save as early as they are now doing. And so there's a lot of work we can do about helping people save more. Some people work in small, tiny businesses or are sole proprietors. They don't have access to a retirement plan. We're looking at whether there can be a vehicle where people can kind of bundle up their folks into a state plan. And then the other thing about economic security is this program called the Medicare Savings Program, and Catherine has some information that she'll leave with people. So this is very important for people who earn just a little bit more, whose income is just a little bit higher than what would enable you to be eligible for public benefits, whether that's Mass Health or a housing voucher. And what the program does is we as the state will pay your Medicare Part B premium and your coinsurance and your deductible. So for a 75-year-old who is spending $6,000 on all that stuff because it adds up, after this program, if you're eligible, you'll spend about $600, which means you have, $5,400 more to put toward transportation or help in your home or home repairs or whatever. So I want to leave the material with you in case you have friends and colleagues who might be eligible. It is a fairly simple application. The Shine counselors know about it and can help folks. And I think it's just, I am proud that I work for a governor who said, I want to do this. So it's just a really, really good move in terms of making folks more economically secure. So I think that's kind of a wrap in terms of what we have to share with you. This is just a picture of some of our colleagues. There are a lot of organizations that support this work and that will support you. I've mentioned most of them. AARP, the Mass Municipal Association. There's a statewide organization of all the councils on aging, and they have a lot of materials, and they have really enormous capacity around dementia support. So you can get a lot of help from them. And then I mentioned some of the funders like Tufts Health Plan Foundation. So we want for this effort to be sustainable. This needs to outlast any of us in state government or any of you in this room. So we're working hard for it to be sustainable. So that as we become a state with many more people over the age of 60 than under the age of 20, we have what we need. So thank you. I can take questions if people have questions. I have no idea what your schedule is and what the day is like. Yes. Yes, you.
First of all, on behalf of the senior organizations and the community, I'd like to thank you for a very comprehensive program.
You are very welcome.
It was very, very enlightening. Of course, I have to ask a question as well. One of the concerns that's always bothered me here is that basically there are really well-meaning people, dedicated people, and they're dedicated programs, but it's very, very difficult to get the people to be involved in the programs. In other words, they're here, but either one, we can't identify who they are out there who are not coming, or two, there's some basic reason why they won't come for the programs. But based upon what you said and what the trend tends to be, is it almost is like a senior center such as this should almost be an octopus with a bunch of arms. And these arms going out, collaborating with other organizations. For example, you mentioned about the senior college, if you will. I mean, that opportunity is here, maybe not from the center itself, but certainly from other organizations. So I look at, you've changed my idea. I was always running, well, why don't these people come? Like this was the only resource they had. And in truth, there are many, many other resources. There's no reason why we can't have a senior college. There's no reason why we can't have programs that, are either tied to music or tied to some other aspect. And it seems that that's the direction they're going. I guess my real question is, do you have any magic idea of how to get people to programs that are already being offered?
So, you're raising such an important issue, and I'll just tell you kind of what my bias is. I think we have to meet people where they are, right? Like my mom's 90, she's not ever gonna go to the senior center. But if someone called her and said, hey Jessie, we have a bus going to the movie theater where we're gonna watch the opera, she'd be there in a heartbeat. And that could be sponsored by the senior center, right? She'd be there, should pay, should be their best friend. So I think some of this is about listening to community, meeting people where they are, and knowing that there are a lot of people who maybe just aren't joiners and who don't want to go to a center. And I know that's just a bias of some people. I know that if I could get them in, they would love it, but maybe I can't get them in. So I think it's a combination of doing what you're already doing. I think it goes a long way to call someone and say, I'm going to this, will you come with me? And then I think the idea of collaboration and community partnerships has got to be part of the answer, because you can't do it all yourselves. So you have to think about, what can I do with the library? What can I do with the orchestra? What can I do with whatever you have? And that's where, when I look at some of the communities where this work is thriving, that's really how they've approached it. They've gotten out of kind of their aging house, and they have brought programs to the community. They've collaborated with others, whether it's an educational organization or whatever. And that's been wildly successful. So that's, I would point you to do that. And the benefit that you all have is, you know your whole community. You know all the organizations. There's probably, anyone you need to call is probably one degree of separation from you, right? Somebody knows that person. So that's really an asset for you. In other communities, people have to break down all kinds of barriers just to get to know someone in the library system, for instance.
I've often thought that it would be a good thing to pair the elderly with, like if you had a situation where you could get the young children with the elderly, pair up somebody who's got so much experience and have them tutor somebody in something. A music program where you could go in and somebody who's played the piano for 40 years. There's so much of that. I mean, I know people who love children and would love to sit down and color with them and talk to them.
Right.
They may not be 100% with it, but I mean, do you know what I'm saying? They're not, sometimes you feel like, I know people because I'm a caregiver and I'm getting, but they feel they can't offer enough, or they're not needed, or they don't want to be babysat.
Right.
They want to help.
Right.
They want to be
have
needed,
purpose.
and they have so much experience to offer.
Right.
If there was a way to put them together somehow.
Right. So there are programs that do that. There's Encore, which is an organization that helps older adults find the right volunteer opportunities. They've done a lot of work. One of their priorities is to pair older adults with children. There's Gen to Gen. There's Bridges. So there are a bunch of models out there that are doing exactly what you're saying. And you can start really small. There are Two Life communities, one of the examples I showed you. They have in their housing, they have relationships. Every housing development they have has a relationship with an elementary school. And many of the people that live in their housing environments are immigrants. And so they talk about Russia and China, and they teach the kids the recipes from their land and whatever. And it's really cool. And it's small little program. But you need to have somebody to coordinate it, you need to have an idea, and you need to get some traction with a partner. But I think it's really important.
I remember when I was in school, we actually had home economics, which I don't think they have that anymore, I don't know.
It's called life skills now.
Okay, well, they had different people's grandmothers and stuff came in and showed them how to make a recipe, and they were a part of it. And my grandfather actually volunteered at one time to teach them how to sow vegetable gardens. It should be done.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all within your, that's in your portfolio, I'm sure, yes.
I just wanted to say that as far as participation in programs, that as many people, like myself, are still working full-time, and if more and more people continue to work later and later, then the programs need not be daytime programs focused completely on daytime attendance, because it's very difficult
Right.
for attendance.
Yes, you're right.
Basic.
In my community, the senior center is now part of a bigger recreation center. And I go to an exercise class on Thursday nights at 7:30, and I will get back there in time tonight, I am determined. And it is full of women my age. I might be the youngest person in the class, and I'm in my 60s. And I think we all work.
Yes.
And it's like the one time that they do a program because it's at 7:30 at night. So yeah, I think we need to think about diversity in all kinds of ways. Maybe there are ways to participate virtually. Maybe there can be webinars. Maybe you can stagger scheduling. Saturdays are days of the week. So I think there are all kinds of things we have to think about. And then I want the employers also to think about their work environment. Does it have to be 40 hours a week, or could it be 32? And that gives people a little flex if they can afford to work less than full time. So I think that all that's part of this. one more question and then I'm gonna hand it back, or maybe I'm gonna hand it back right now. Yes.
What do most places call seniors? Is it 55, 60, 65?
Oh, gosh, I can't answer that question. So I think we live in a world, I think, I had this conversation with the governor a couple months ago. You know, I think because Medicare is such a marker that we know 65 works, right? But then we have other programs where people are eligible at the age of 60. And then the AARP said, well, we just want to be there for all adults, right? So we're going to lower our age to 50. So I think you can make up your mind about what you want to do. I think people do not like being called the elderly, right? Because it makes it sound like they're all the same, right? Like the Oreos, right? All Oreos are alike, but the elderly are not all the same. And I think people, some people don't like to be called seniors. Some people just like to be called adults or older adults or mature adults. And I think there's a lot of geographic and cultural variation in what words work in your community and what ages work. So I can't answer that question. Somebody has to be way smarter than me.
I tell people I'm pretending to be old.
Well, exactly. Or I play an old person on television, is what I say. Yeah. All right, who am I giving this back to? Okay, thank you.
Robin and Catherine, I just want to thank you guys both so much for such an enlightening and dynamic presentation and such thorough answers to our questions. And I want to thank you all for coming. Thank you guys. You're really